Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
I feel like we're going in session right now. We're having a therapy session. I really do. But it's a good thing. And in the past, when we've gotten together with her, she's our diamond of the decade. We've learned so much about the process of therapy, but also, well, we're challenged by what's going on. Today, we're going to talk about the F word, forgiveness, and how that can really change your life. We don't condone what somebody may have done, but why should we forgive? Why do we have to? Why is it so important? Sometimes we can't even imagine forgiving somebody, but it is the best thing for us. Let's talk about that today. She is the woman behind New Beginnings Wellness Center, located in Massachusetts. Always great to have her back with us. Sherri Ann Alexandrovich joins us on the program. How are you?
I'm doing good today. How are you doing?
Very well, very well. And
Good.
forgiving. Now, again, we don't condone what somebody may have done,
hmm
but why should we forgive somebody? Why is it so important? Why does it make such a difference?
I think that when we hold on to anger and resentment, it takes up a lot of negative energy inside of our heart and inside of our brains and inside of our body. And I think that for our own self, for our own personal growth, it's really important to not necessarily let things go in the sense of it's okay to be treated poorly, or it's okay that somebody may have done something wrong to hurt you, but more in the sense of how do you move forward in a more positive, open, positive path. And it's really hard to do that when our heart and our brains are really weighed down with a lot of negativity or a lot of anger. It doesn't really give us that opportunity to look at things from different perspectives. And so I think it's really important that, we just be open to what is it that we need for ourselves in order to move forward and in order to see the lessons that the universe has given to us in order to be able to take on new projects or to have just this more positivity in a better light. Because when we're if you think about when somebody's done something wrong, right, what happens? We ruminate and we perseverate, and we just go over it and over it and over it in our mind. I
Yep.
wish I had done this differently. I wish they had only done this. And we kind of live continuing perseveration on this woulda, coulda, shoulda, which are probably the three most detrimental things that we can do as an individual to ourselves,
Sure.
because that just continues over and over and over in our minds. And so when we're concentrating on that, we're not freeing ourselves up to be able to take on new things or to see things from a more positive perspective.
I call it the emotional backpack, and there's a lot in the backpack just from life in general. But now you add in these feelings that you may harbor for someone. Obviously, they did
Mhm.
something because you haven't forgiven them, and now you're walking around with that. Um, it's not easy to forgive. Are there suggestions you might have for somebody to slowly get them into the mindset of releasing this?
So I think that the first step to that is really kind of coming to a place of acceptance for yourself of where you're at and how you got to where you are. And I think that that's the first step that you need to in order to kind of build and move forward to be able to get to that next step. So if we're not at that acceptance stage of whatever happened, whether it be a breakup or a divorce or you've been fired or a death or whatever that is, if you're still stuck in that place where you haven't yet accepted that event, we'll call it, in our life, then we can't really have any more forward movement, because if we're stuck there, then that's as far as we go. But if we can start with the acceptance piece of it, of okay, this is what happened. We may not like it. It may not have, we may not have deserved it. We wish it didn't happen. Then we can't move forward. So if we get to that first kind of like stepping stone of acceptance, then we can have that forward movement of, okay, well, what lesson did I have in this piece of it?
Mm.
Or what could I have done differently? And I think that's the piece that people sometimes overlook. And I think in a therapeutic session, that's where your work is going to be. That's where you want to start, because you want to see, did I play a role in that? Am I repeating patterns? Are there things from my past that are coming up that are not allowing me to move forward in a different perspective? And so when we're kind of like stuck in that place, we really don't have any. It's hard to get to the closure point if we're not even at the starting point. So it has to kind of be sequential, if that makes sense.
Sure. And once you've gone through, well, even before we get to that, what are some techniques that we can do? Therapy being one of them, and maybe we do these things in addition to therapy. For example, I've heard write a letter to the other person that did you wrong. You're never
Mhm,
going to give it to them.
mhm.
You can symbolically throw it in a fireplace or a fire pit and let it go, release it to the universe. Are there
Yeah.
things that we can do like that that can help move things forward?
So writing a letter is great, journaling is great.
Mm.
Sometimes we'll do, role playing in a therapy session where I would be the person that you would want to say those things to, so that we can kind of
Ah,
reenact what that would look like. Sometimes when I'm working with the younger kids, I will let them sit in my chair and I will sit in their chair, and we'll switch places. And so we can, sometimes when you're working with the younger kiddos, that gives that opportunity for them to kind of facilitate, and now they're the leader of this session, so to speak, and they can. It's interesting to watch that unfold when you're
sure.
working with kids, because where they take it is just obviously a subconscious level of where they want you to take them. And so that always gives a great opportunity for them to be able to role play through or work through whatever is going on for them. And now if they're the facilitator or they're the therapist, the pressure's off of them. So now they can be the person that's leading, so the session, and being able to talk about all of those things that apply to them, but they're not saying that it applies to them. So it's kind of like a backdoor way of getting in and talking to kids about some of those things that are going on. And when you're thinking about when you're dealing with kids and helping them process, they don't have the same ability or cognitive skills or coping skills or toolbox that us adults have. And so they're a little bit more challenging. And at the same time, because they don't have all of that, to some degree it's a little bit easier, because it's helping them move through, and they're not quite as resistant as maybe adults would be. So it's kind of, it's a half a dozen either way of which population is easier to kind of work through with that. I love journaling. I always tell my clients to just open up the page and just word vomit. Doesn't have to make sense, doesn't have to
Yep.
be a complete sentence. Just get it out. And lists are important. And sometimes just kind of writing out pros and cons to help us work through. I love that exercise. That's always one of my absolute favorites. I do that for myself too. And so then you can kind of go back. So what I love about getting it out of your head and onto a piece of paper is that now you can go back and you can look at what you wrote down. And so some of the journaling exercises that I give to my clients is, you do your word vomit in that moment when you're
Mm.
upset or when you're sad or when you're angry. And then you go back the next day and you reread it. And you can look at it from a whole different perspective. And sometimes you have a whole other journal entry that goes with that. And sometimes you think of things just a little bit differently, because in that moment we're upset, we're sad, we're angry, we're happy, whatever the emotion is. And again, we as humans, we perseverate and we get stuck in our minds, and as long as that rumination continues, we don't really get closure, because we don't really remember what that end sentence was, because we've gone through it so many times in our brain. So it's important to get it out, come up with, kind of, sometimes the word vomit is first, and then you do the pros and the cons list, and then you go back and you reread that word vomit, or you bring it to session, or sometimes I have my clients email it to me so that I have it prior to session so that I have that information. So we're not kind of wasting the first, 5, 10 minutes reviewing what that looks like. We're able to kind of just dive right in and use the time that we have together.
Word vomit is the best description. And when you were describing it before you labeled it, I'm thinking just that. Just get it all out. Acknowledgement. Put it in front of your face. Nothing better than writing it because it came from you. Especially writing it, not typing it, scientifically proven that you need to physically write. But word vomit, you think if you ate something that didn't agree with your stomach, maybe food poisoning, got to get it out.
Right,
And
right.
this is it. This is the way to do it. I love role playing too. I never even thought of that. That is, and let's really be obvious and just state this, but if forgiveness needs to take place, many times it's connected to a relationship, and many times, well, all the time, relationships takes two.
Mhm.
Now, I'm not saying that that necessarily means that somebody is responsible for something that was done to them. But in a relationship, it could have been a 90-10, 80-20, where the 80 is the person that did something really bad, and there's, 20 on the other side of the relationship. Then you have those off cases where it was a stranger. It may have been an act of violence. And I remember a story last year, and I'm in the New York metro area, where a drunk driver took the life of a 7-year-old boy. And very shortly thereafter, his mother said, I forgive that driver.
Mhm.
I don't even know how you could do that, but she did. And she said, and my son's vital organs will be donated to help somebody live. She found it within to forgive. Um, I give her a lot of credit, and I get a lot of credit to release that.
Yeah, and I think that that's different for everybody when you're dealing with, loss of a child.
Yeah,
Think that every parent deals with that a little bit differently depending on what the circumstances or what their belief system is. I think that there's so many different variables that play a role in what that forgiveness looks like.
yeah,
If religious or faith-based people, they go to church and they go to their pastor, or they kind of seek this guidance through, their higher power, whoever or whatever that may be, and that helps them to get through it. And then there are other people who really kind of feel lost and they don't really know where to go with it, or how to move forward with it, or they don't have somebody positive in their life or have that kind of lifeline for them to help, to be able to help move forward and get the help that they need, or to kind of have somebody reframe, or even just help them to process what happened. It's just, forgiveness is such a big topic, and it's just so wide and diverse depending on, what it is that you're looking to forgive and what is its intention. And so, one of the things that I work with my clients on also with the forgiveness piece of it is forgiveness is for you. It's not for them.
right.
And that's super important. And the reason is because you don't know how that person is going to respond. So if you go into, this forgiveness with the expectation that the person is going to respond in either a positive way, or tell you that you're right, or have this eye-opening epiphany, you're setting yourself up for failure. And so it's really important that when
Totally.
we talk about forgiveness, right, that we're really talking about what is its intention. And intention is such an important word, and it's so big because it applies to everything, even communication style. When I'm working with my clients and we're working on what does communication look like, or I'm working with teenagers on what does communication look like, my question is always, what is the intention? What is it that you're hoping to convey? And because that's important, right? Because we sometimes we want to say things because we're angry or we want to hurt somebody. And
Sure.
that's an important, right? So if we can take a pause for
Hmm.
ourselves and take a breath and say, okay, what's my intention? What is it that I'm hoping that the reader is going to, get out of this,
Yep.
what is I'm about to say? And that changes. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I will go to type something, or I'll go to say something, and in my mind, I'm already playing it out 5 steps ahead. And I'm like, okay, so before I hit send, I'm going to reread that and make sure, because what is my intention? Am I angry at that person? Is it a passive aggressive comment?
Mm.
What am I hoping? Am I going to say something so that you can now feel my hurt and my pain? And what's my intention on that? So just because I want you to know how much pain I'm in or how much I'm hurting doesn't mean that you're going to tell me that you're sorry or doesn't mean that it's going to be a genuine apology. So that's why intention is so important because we don't want to set ourselves up for more pain. We don't want to set ourselves up for more disappointment. So we have to be really realistic about what it is that we're doing. And
Mm.
I know we've talked about this before. I do my tarot cards, and so one of my cards last week came up, and in the same card, I shuffled the deck. Same card came up 3 different times, and the card itself was telling me, "Stay true to yourself." So that was my interpretation of that card. And so some scenarios came up where I was like, well, should I answer this way or should I answer that way? In our instinct, especially for me as a therapist, my instinct is to always 3000% stop, think, pause before I speak. And then I thought of my card and I thought, well, wait a minute. My card's telling me that I should just move forward with, you know, to being true to myself. And so that put a different perspective on how I was going to respond to something. So it's just so multifaceted. It's just an interesting topic.
So important.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
important. And that word
Right.
intention, if we pare it down, it's intend. So what are you intending to get from what you're doing? And very much so to your point, I don't think I've ever would have seen it this way, but let's say that person did you wrong. It's been going on for a while within you. You, maybe you think you should forgive them, but you're not at that point. So now you're going to fire off a text. Maybe something triggered you, maybe whatever it might be. What are you intending to have happen? Because if you fire that text off, something may come back. Is that really what you
Mhm.
want? Now it's almost like just, salt in the wound. And I didn't invent this, but I heard it and love it. The three filter before you
Mhm.
send that text, that email. Is it necessary?
Yeah.
Is it true? Is it kind?
Mm.
So put it through all of those. All right, it may be true. They did something. Ow, and they continue to hurt. Damn
Mhm.
them. Okay, we got the truth. You're going to send a text. Tell them how you feel. Is it necessary? Where are we going with that? Intention. What are you intending to get back? And is it kind? Probably not. And, it kind of hurts to be kind to somebody who hurt you, but therein lies the beginning of the forgiveness journey. How do you
Right.
know you've done it? How do you know you've gotten to the point? Let's say you've taken some of those steps, and now you're sitting there wondering, I wonder if I'm good. I wonder if I've fully forgiven them. How do you know?
Mhm. So just one other point to a coping strategy to the text messaging, text yourself. So when you have that
Ooh,
moment of impulsivity where you're angry, you're
ooh,
upset, or you want to reply to something, if you text yourself, you get out of that, you get that impulsive need out. And then you
ooh.
have that opportunity to read it back to yourself and say, oh, geez, how did I interpret that? Because we have to remember that text messaging, the person who's going to read it is interpreting it based on their state of mind.
Hmm.
Tone cannot be interpreted via text,
So I
right?
want to
So,
make sure I have this clear. Make sure
mhm.
and we have time, but I want to get here.
Okay.
Are you saying that you should text yourself what you would have texted them?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay.
Mm. So when
That's a
you're in
good
that
one.
moment, right, and you've had a couple of drinks, or you're angry and you're in a triggered state, or you're falling down that rabbit hole and you feel it, you know it, you just you're not in a good space, but you just have this overpowering need to text, and you just need to get that out. Just text yourself, then read it back to yourself, and then make the decision. If you can always just copy and paste it and send it to that person if that's what the intention is exactly how you wanted it to be. But sometimes when you read it back to yourself, you say, oh, yeah, no, that's not what I was intending for it to say. Or, you can interpret it a little bit differently. So that gives you that opportunity. And that's where the pause comes in. And that's why it's so important to pause and think before you speak, because then that gives you that opportunity to change the narrative.
The texting yourself is genius. I don't know how I didn't even, I'm not a genius. I didn't think of that. But when you get that text, and even you can even take it a step further, you could text yourself and you could schedule it. So let it arrive in like 2 hours as if you
Mhm.
are the other person. It just came out of nowhere. I got a text. Oh, it's me about
Right.
this situation. And how does it
Hmm.
look to them? Again, we're not letting
Hmm.
them off the hook for anything. Not at
No,
all.
no.
But the intention, what are you intending them to get from it? And if you're just purging, they don't really care. They're done. They already moved on.
Right. And I think that I just, I want to make sure that, everybody that's listening to this is hearing the strong message that forgiveness is about ourselves. And you would ask the question, how do you know when you forgive?
Right.
So that's different for everybody. It's when is our heart at peace? When do we feel at peace? Or, it doesn't mean it's not going to hurt. It doesn't mean that it isn't, you're not going to wish that the outcome was differently. It's when are you at peace within yourself to say, okay, that I've done what I feel like I have needed to do. I've gone where I've needed to go. I've said what I've needed to say. There really isn't anything left to do or to say on this topic because I feel good. I feel good about how I handled it, or I feel good about, the outcome for me, because that's what's important at the end of this, right? Our journey is about ourselves. It's about how do we continue to be the best version of us that we can be. And that's from just open-mindedness, that's from forward movement, that comes from all of that self-growth and being honest and genuine with us. Because at the end of the day, the only person that's going to hold us accountable is us. We have
Mm.
to look at each other, at ourselves in the mirror every day. And if you can wake up every morning and say to yourself in the mirror, I feel good about the decisions that I'm making. I feel good about who I am as a person. I feel good about, what I've accomplished. Then there's your peace. Because when we're looking for it from somebody else, we are going to be disappointed.
Always.
We can never determine, we don't know what that other person, what kind of a day they're having. So, if in one of the things that I work with my teenagers on is if we're always looking for someone else to validate us, then we are just going to ride that emotional roller coaster with whoever that person is that we're looking for validation from.
Yeah.
We have to feel at peace in our hearts and in our soul of what are we doing? What is our intention? What are our outcomes? And how do we move forward? Because, if you're just sitting and you're living with regret or resentment or anger, but your partner told you you did a good job, do you really feel like you did a good job? Because inside you're not feeling so great, right? Somebody else is telling you did a good job, or they're having a really bad day and they answer you in a sarcastic way. And now if your whole event was tied to the other person's response, you're going to be disappointed, and your takeaway from that is going to
Yeah.
be maybe I didn't do such a great job. And that's why it's so important to have that inner sense of self and to really genuinely be able to be honest with who you are and the decisions that you make, because we are our own judge and jury, and most of us do a really good job at critiquing every single thing that we do, far more than most other people are going to judge or critique us.
You said the word peace. And sure,
Mhm.
we all want that. When I figured that out, I was like, oh, that's what that means. But I'd look at it as peace and peace, two different words.
Mhm.
Finding that peace inside only comes when you find the piece that's missing. And the piece that's missing isn't going to be found in somebody else. Something happened along the way in your life, could be a trauma when you were a kid, whatever it might be. That's
Mhm.
what's missing. But many of us, as you said, look for the validation in others to get that missing piece. It's
Right.
not going to come from them
No, and you know what? Even if there's four pieces of the puzzle missing, you can still finish the puzzle.
for sure. I think we'll end on that point.
Okay.
Awesome. Sherry Ann, I know that you work with people up in Massachusetts. Can you do it virtually as well?
Yes. Yep. We do Zoom. Actually, we're probably 60% still Zoom, as a matter of fact.
Beautiful. Best way to find you and your team.
Newbeginningswc.com.
Thank you for today. Thank you
All right.
for it's a tough topic because many of us just are angry, about other people. And we didn't even get to forgiving yourself, but the process works the same way.
It does. It does work the same way. Maybe it's a little bit more difficult to forgive ourselves, because I think that a lot of us hold ourselves to a really high standard. So I don't know, maybe we talk about that next week.
Love it. Thank you so much for today.
All right. Thank you. I'll see you next week.
We'll be right back.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.